Faith of our fathers, living still, in spite of trudgeon, fire, and sword. O thou our heart behind with joy, where we hear that glorious word. Faith of our fathers, holy faith, we will be true to thee till death. Our fathers shade in prisons dark, we're still in heart and conscience free. How sweet would be their children's faith, if they like him could die for thee. Faith of our fathers, holy faith, we will be true to thee till death. Faith of our fathers, we will love, both friend and foe, in all our strife, and preaching truth as love knows how, by kindly words and virtuous line. Faith of our fathers, holy faith, we will be true to thee till death.
Good morning. If you have your Bibles, turn to Luke chapter 14. Luke chapter 14. We'll be there in 1 minute. Luke chapter 14. It's good to see you. It's good to be with you. It's good to see everyone here. Probably in this room, like many other rooms in churches across the country, we have people, members from in all different stages of their spiritual life. We have some that are kind of just approaching God for the first time. They haven't quite made a commitment yet, but they're seeking the truth. They're seeking to be part of that. There are some who have been away for a while. They were once committed to Christ, and then they kind of, for a period of life, just decide they wanted to go their own way. And then now they're kind of coming back. They're trying to work on their spiritual life with God. There's some who would consider themselves as Christians, as people of God, as followers of Jesus, but their life may not reflect that. They kind of are present, but they're not really involved or spiritual. And then there is also those who are consider themselves as Christians, and they're doing the best they can, but as we all should, trying to get better and trying to work our lives, applying some of the things we talk about, James, of looking at the scriptures like a mirror and trying to pick out our flaws and trying to get better. We're in all different areas of our life. Jesus kind of brings out all of these different people and kind of tries to sort out these different people in various times in his ministry. One of those times is right here in Luke chapter 14. And so if you don't mind reading this section with me, starting in verse 25, Luke chapter 14, starting in verse 25. Now great crowds were accompanying him, And he turned and said to them, if anyone comes to me and does not hate his own father and mother and wife and children and brothers and sisters, and yes, even his own life, he cannot be my disciple. Whoever does not bear his own cross and come after me cannot be my disciple. For which of you, desiring to build a tower, does not first sit down and count the cost, whether he has enough to complete it? Otherwise, when he has laid a foundation and is not able to finish, all who see it will begin to mock him, saying, this man began to build and was not able to finish. Or what king, going out to encounter another king in war, will not sit down first and deliberate whether he is able with 10,000 to meet him who comes against him with 20,000? And if not, while the other is still yet a great way off, he sends a delegation and asks for terms of peace. So therefore, any one of you who does not renounce all he has cannot be my disciple. Salt is good, but if salt has lost its taste, how should the saltiness be restored? It is of no use, either for the soil or for the manure pile. It is thrown away. He who has ears to hear, let him hear. I believe there's four questions that from this passage, from Jesus' words, that we need to ask ourselves. Four questions that I believe that Jesus introduces to us about discipleship from this passage. And so this morning I want to look at those four questions, ask yourself those four questions, and see if you are a true disciple of Jesus. The first comes from verse 25, and talking about who was following him. And the first question I think he kind of presents is, are you a disciple or are you just following the crowd, just a general follower of Jesus? Most people love Jesus, at least in some kind of form. His grace, his mercy, his love, his compassion, do unto others as they would have, you would do unto others and you would have them do to you. All these great words of wisdom, the parables that spark your imagination. Most people in this world, like back in that day, like some form of Jesus. They want to follow him. Most people in this country say they follow Jesus, say they are a Christian of some sort. But do you think that everyone in the crowd, everyone today, really gets Jesus or are really devoted disciples of Jesus? And I would say probably not. And you can definitely tell that in that crowd, because this crowd, 7 days or just a little short time later, will go into Jerusalem and chant Hosanna and pronounce him king. And then some of this crowd 7 days later will say, crucify him, crucify him. They did not get all of Jesus. They were just kind of following Jesus. And so Jesus from time to time would try to weed out, to separate who were the true followers of him and who were just kind of going with the crowd, kind of just were on Team Jesus, like Jesus. And he does this a lot of times throughout John. It's almost like he looks behind him. He's like, there's a great crowd. And he's like, I know all you are not for real, so I'm going to try to weed some of you out. In John, he does this a number of times with, one time he says that if you don't eat my flesh and don't drink my blood, you will have no life. And at that point, some said this is a hard saying and followed him no more. Well, this is another hard saying that he says to try to weed out the crowd from the disciples. He says, if you don't hate your family, even your own self, you cannot be my disciple. You cannot follow me. When we talk about disciples, the follower versus the disciple is not something we usually use in our vernacular outside of Christianology, outside the church building usually. It's usually kind of used of very devoted people to a certain master or a certain art. I think probably the closest word that we have today to describe disciple is probably apprentice. Someone who picks someone that they believe is a master, that they want to become like, and they work and they train and they study under this person until they become like the master. The word disciple actually just means learner in the Greek. It's someone who teaches. And it's something that just doesn't happen to happen. It takes effort. It takes decision. It takes work. It doesn't just happen by, okay, I'm going with the crowd over here and we're going to learn from Jesus. It takes effort. It takes work in your day. There is a difference between the desire to follow Jesus and making the choice and the effort to follow him and turn your life to look like his. And so the first question I think Jesus has asked the crowd and asked us, are you a follower? Are you a disciple? And really the answer to that comes to how you answer this second question, which is, do you hate your family and even your own life? Jesus is trying to shock the crowd then, as he does us today, and it shocks many people, and some people are turned off by Jesus saying such a thing. You know, you must hate your mother and your father and your brothers and sisters, otherwise you cannot be my disciple. So even though I'm going to give context to his saying, don't try to remove the shocking value. He's trying to give that shocking value. But hate, like its counterpart love, is a relational word. But even in our English vocabulary, we don't even use those words strictly literal. We use them kind of figuratively all the time. And I've used this example before by saying, I love Chick-fil-A a lot. I love spicy sandwich with Chick-fil-A sauce and, fries and sweet tea. That is great. There's no better meal than that, in my opinion. But if I say I love Chick-fil-A like I love my wife, there's a problem there. There's just a problem there. My marriage is probably in trouble if it's the same type of love I'm talking about. And the same way is with hate. I hate mushrooms a lot. They're slimy and they're gross. But if I say I hate someone else, that's a different kind of hate. We kind of use these in very figurative language. Well, in kind of the Jewish vernacular, they use love and hate to describe your allegiance and your devotion to a person. If I say I love one thing, my devotion and my allegiance to it is so great that in comparison, I hate everything else, or the opposite. Take, for example, it's on the other page, Luke chapter 16. In my Bible, it's just one page over. Luke 16 and verse 13. He uses the same kind of vernacular here. Luke 16, verse 13. No servant can have two masters, for he will either hate the one and love the other. He will be devoted to one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and money. So is Jesus saying you need to love God and you need to hate your money? You need to pull out your money and say, I hate you, hate you, hate you. No, that's not what he's saying. In fact, notice the parallel for it. You will either love one and hate, or you will either hate one and love the other. You will either be devoted to one or despise the other. It's about devotion. It's about what you're committed to. So Jesus is not telling all his disciples, all people who are following him, to go home and get in a big fight with your family and say, I will never love you like I love Christ. I hate you. Slam the door, walk away. That's not what he is talking about here. He's talking about your devotion to me has to be so great that in comparison, your devotion to your family, to yourself, to your job, to anything else is like you hate it. That is how big your devotion is. And what Jesus does, and I think this is just a wonderful teaching, is he picks the two greatest idols that humanity has ever made. The two greatest idols. And they're not necessarily bad things. Idols are just something that you place before God. And these are the two greatest idols that mankind has exalted above God. And the first is family and tribe. Especially think about the Jewish context and in this culture. Did they think about family and tribe like we think about family and tribe today? Did they think about their grandparents and their family name and their mom and dad like we do today? No, it was everything. It was all about the family. The family became above everything else. You did not just move away from your family. That's not something you did to go search out your hopes and your dreams and become self-actualized. You either moved in with your family or you're built right beside it, or you were around at least in the same city. You helped each other in the family. And you did not just marry who you wanted to for love or whatever reason. You married whoever brought the most power, prestige, or financial influence to your family. You did everything for the sake of your family. Even if you wanted to go do something else, you took up the family business. And so Johnny, even though he doesn't want to make pottery and jars, he does that even though he wants to go off and study IT or computer science or something like that. Everything is dedicated and decisions are made with the family's greatest interest in mind. And we have many cultures like this today. A lot of Eastern cultures are like this. And even some cultures today in many parts of the world have this family group tribe above all else thinking. And so Jesus walks into that culture and basically throws a grenade and says, you must basically hate that compared to your allegiance to me today. And even in our American individualistic culture, we get swept away by kind of these same influences today. I've met people who their greatest devotion in their life is to their mom or to their dad. They try to make their parents proud, and that drives everything they do. They pick the job and the career that they do because they're trying to make their parents proud. They pick the spouse they do because they're trying to make their parents proud. They have the kids and raise the kids like they do because they want to make their parents proud. They do everything for the sake of the parents. I've met people who have their spouse as number one in their life. They make every decision, they make every step they make is with their spouse in mind and make that number one. I've seen parents who have their kids as number one in their life, where their whole day, their whole life rotates around the kids and doing what the kids need. And then they don't know what life is like when the kids move out. I have seen people who make their political party or social activist organization or some other social club or group as the number one priority in their life, and they shirk all other responsibilities to serve those because it is number one. And what Jesus is saying is if you don't leave your family, if you don't hate your family, your mom, your dad, your political party, your club, your friends, your job, your kids, anything else, and follow me, you cannot be my disciple. And what Jesus is trying to do is he's not trying to be egotistic. He's not saying that I want to be just worshipped and adored because I have some egotistic nature that needs to be fed. He's trying to save you. Because he knows that all of these things, if we make them number one in our lives, will lead us to heartbreak. Because we can't expect from someone else what only God can provide for our lives. We have to have him as our number one. But time and time again, throughout human history, family and tribe has been the number one idol in their lives. And then the number two idol is yourself. It's about putting my priority, making my allegiance myself. And Jesus said, if you do not hate your allegiance to yourself or doing things for what you want, and instead give me that, you cannot be my disciple. There's some cultures that are totally consumed about pleasing oneself. Don't know any cultures like that. There are some who don't care necessarily about anyone else. Their main goal is to be self-fulfilled, to self-actualize. So they'll jump from job to job or relationship to relationship, church to church, place to place, trying to find fulfillment. Whatever meets my needs at that point in my life, that is where I'm going to go. There is no loyalty. There is no seeking the good of others. It is just trying to find self-fulfillment for me. And what Jesus is saying is, if that is your end goal in your life, that will lead to heartache as well. Jesus is saying that if I'm not number one in your life will be empty and it will be void. And if you're willing to trust me, if you're willing to put me first in your life, you can be my disciple and have everlasting life. So when you lose your dream job, when maybe even your marriage falls through, when something tragic happens in your life, it doesn't make your entire life crumble because your identity isn't in those things. It is in Jesus. Do you hate all of the things compared to your devotion to Jesus? And the third question, it kind of comes from the parables that he tells about a person, a builder who laid a foundation and then he wasn't able to complete it. Or don't you, as you're a general, as you're a king, you go and see if you have the capability to defeat the upcoming army. Otherwise, you make other plans. Do you count the cost? Have you counted the cost in your life? Jesus says that in pretty much in any commitment we make, we try to count the cost. We see if we can follow through on that commitment. How much more the commitment of being a disciple of Jesus? But that also implies that there is cost to being a disciple of Jesus. I think there's a lot of people who think there is no cost to discipling Jesus, or they'll say a prayer, they'll get baptized or whatever, but they don't really seek to change their life. They don't become giving their life over to Christ instead of following what they want or what their family wants or their desires or their needs and transferring that to what Christ expects out of them. They just kind of keep going their own way. And so the question I think Jesus is asking is, if you are thinking about becoming a disciple, what is it going to cost you? And if you are a disciple, what has it cost you? Because following Jesus is not free. You will give up family. You will give up friends. You may give up jobs. You may give up your dreams and your hopes and your aspirations. You will give up something in life because you are following Christ. What has it been for you? And if you think in your life, I can't really think of anything, how are you making the sacrifices of following Jesus then? Because following Jesus costs. And sometimes it will cost dearly. Jesus talked about it as picking up your cross and following him. That is not a light burden. It will cost you dearly. Have you counted the cost? What has been a disciple of Jesus cost you? And then finally, the final question, are you salty? He kind of does these, this is like typical Jesus, where he goes in this deep, heavy teaching about, have you counted the cost? Are you willing to hate your family and yourself and to become my disciple? And then he says, salt is good. It's just like, okay, salt is good. But if salt has lost its taste, how shall its saltiness be restored? It is no use to either for the soil or for the manure pile, and should be thrown away. You his ears, let him hear. And this is what I think he means by that. If you go back to the Sermon on the Mount, he used this kind of illustration there too. My disciples need to be the salt of the earth and the light of the world, that people may see your good works and glorify God in heaven. The idea is that it performs a specific function in which you know it's there by what it does. And it puts emphasis, especially in this passage, about salt that's lost its saltiness. What's good is salt when it loses the one thing, the one job it was to perform. So Jesus basically says, what good is a bunch of followers who do not supply an action? What good is a bunch of people who follow me around and claim to be my disciples, and yet you don't see Jesus in their lives? What good is a bunch of people showing up in a church building if they don't live the Christ life, taking their cross and following me Monday through Saturday? If you lost your saltiness, how are you supposed to gain it back? And I think this has direct application to your life as far as what you choose to be number one. Because if you are putting, for example, yourself number one in your job, that self-fulfillment, self-accusation is number one in your life, what is your place, your action, your words going to be like in that job? It's going to be about trying to get ahead. It's going to be trying to better myself, to get the promotion, to get the raise, to better myself in the career. It's going to be about myself. And what Jesus says is, if you take that way, you give me that life, you put that life to death, and you follow me as my disciple, how does that change your place in the workplace? Well, instead of being all about myself, I think about God. I think about being the salt of the world, the light of the world. How I could show Jesus and God in my actions and in my words so that they get the glory in their life. This isn't about handing out Jesus tracts or, beating the bush for Jesus. This is just how you live. Day in, day out. Not complaining, not being negative, not being someone of the world that has a quick temper, a bad mouth, but being positive, encouraging, telling people how God has blessed you so richly, bringing God clearly in your life day after day because you're walking with Him. And through your actions and through Christ living in you, God will get the glory. And people will see the light in you. And people will see the saltiness in you. But what good is a follower of God who is not salty at all, who has no actions to back up his words? And so as we conclude, I think a lot of people think of God, think of Jesus as more of a politician. And they treat it almost as a campaign. I will give my funds, I'll donate to the cause, I will represent, with jewelry, with a t-shirt. I will listen to the campaign speeches. And if I vote for you, you will make my life better. You'll make my job better, you'll make my family better, you'll make my marriage better, and that's the deal. And so when those things don't happen, when their life gets tougher, when their marriage was their number one in their life and that falls through, or career or self-actualization was their number one in their life, and that fell through, and that didn't happen, their whole life is destroyed. Because they're put their faith, their supposed faith in Jesus to make it all work to their good. Well, Jesus is not a politician. He's more like a skilled surgeon or doctor who tells you hard things in life. He tells you what you need to give up, that the current path that you're living will lead to death. And if you don't live better, if you don't exercise, eat right, do the things that you need to do, and maybe there's some surgery involved to take out some impurities in you, you're going to die. It's not going to be easy. But he has your life, your big life picture, in the forefront of his mind. Are you a disciple or are you a follower? Are you salty in your life with people you go to? Have you counted the cross? Does it cost you something? Are you willing to give up everything, including your family, your friends, your job, even your own wants and your desires, for the sake of your allegiance to Christ? If you need any help, we are here to help. We're here to help you gain knowledge of the Scriptures. We help you to understand Jesus better and what his role in your life is. If we can help you in any way, if you would like to be baptized, we invite you to come forward as we stand, as we sing.
Away.